I'd like to tell you about one of my favourite teachers. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He lived there, I'm not exactly sure for how long, for a couple of decades, until the Vietnam War occurred, and then he became quite outspoken against the war and was advocating for peace. He went to great lengths. He went to the US to talk to political leaders there as well. There's quite a famous photo of him and Dr. Martin Luther King, which looks great. Dr. King ended up nominating Thay, as he's affectionately known by his students, for a Nobel Peace Prize. He didn't win it. I'm not sure why not, but just to be nominated is a huge honour. How the Vietnam government responded to his peace efforts, well, they exiled him. Boggles the mind how some governments reach these decisions. And so what Thay ended up doing was settling in France. He founded a new Buddhist order called the Order of Interbeing, and he built a monastery there called Plum Village, and that practice centre, that was the first Plum Village, and gone on to have a number of them around the world now. And so that's Thay. He wrote over 100 books during his life. Incredible, hey? Incredible. I heard a story of his years ago, and the story goes that he was walking one day, and then he got to looking at a tree and looking at a leaf, and he wondered if the leaf was scared to be falling from the tree, and the leaf spoke to him, and the leaf said, "No, of course I'm not scared. I am the tree." I'm paraphrasing here. It's like, you can't take me out of the tree. I'll always be part of the tree, but it's okay. And paraphrasing. And the story stuck with me for years. And the main thing that stuck with me was, like, I wondered, did he hear the leaf? Like, did he really hear it? Is it a metaphor or is it literal? And I wondered that because, like, I hear from spirits, and I have my whole adult life. I hear from these entities that can't be explained. So if I can hear from them, maybe people can hear from leaves. So Thay left his body in January 2022. He was in his 90s. It was in February 2022 that he first connected with me. There was one day I was working from home, and I was walking down my corridor to the kitchen to make some lunch, and I saw him in my mind's eye, and I knew it was him saying hello. Oh, I was humbled. I was elated, of course, but I was humbled. It blew me away. It was a couple of weeks later before he connected with me again. This time it was in meditation. And during the meditation, he came to me and he said, "I told my story. You tell yours." At this point, I'd been considering writing a book, but it was hard because I've been so secret squirrel about my life and especially about my mystical experiences. But that was the last push that I really needed to start writing. So soon thereafter, I started writing my first book. So I travelled the world last year for 9 months on my own, and I went to Plum Village in France. I did a 2-week retreat there. It was the first retreat I've ever done. The energy there was beautiful. It was loving. It was quiet. It was clear. You know how, like, when you go camping and you're near water and everyone's just going slow and it's quiet, it's nice and it's natural. I felt like that, except there were sort of lots of people there. That first week that I was there, or the first few days, I was so happy. I felt like, in the words of Thay, I was home. I'd arrived. It just felt beautiful and right, and I just wanted to live there. And then as the days went on, so we did the morning meditation, like 6 a.m. meditation, all of us in the meditation hall. We would do eating meditation, eating in silence. That was a very powerful practice, to have a meal in a room with like 50 people and no one saying a word. You just hear the noises of the eating, but no talking, filling up the air. And make sure really aware of what's going on. Did a number of walking meditations. They were good as well, again in silence, but everyone's together. And so I got to about week 2 where I just felt like I was floating on air, lots of meditation, lots of nourishing conversations with people on the same sort of spiritual path. And I was just feeling great. Then it all started falling apart a little bit. I had this memory that arose from my childhood. I remembered being vegetarian. I couldn't remember how long for, but I remembered I was vegetarian. So I was like, oh. And then I remember my parents tricking me into eating meat. I remember that. My brother laughing at me when he's like, you just ate some whatever it was. So I remembered that. And I was upset. I was really upset. Just like, oh, why would they do that to me? Like, I spent most of my life eating meat. Maybe if they'd honoured what I'd wanted as a child, that I wouldn't have spent decades eating meat. I could have avoided that. I was upset. I was really upset with my parents. But isn't it incredible that it took a good 30 years since that event had happened for me to remember it? Like I'd completely forgotten about it. Afterwards, a couple months later, I spoke to my auntie, because my parents had passed. I spoke to my auntie to ask her if she remembered that time. And that's all I said to her. She said, yeah, I remember. She said it was about a year you were vegetarian for, but you were real sickly. Like your mum was worried about you and they didn't know what to do. And so, yeah, they got you to start eating meat again. Well, that was a whole nother side to the story, wasn't it? Like I didn't tell my auntie when I asked that I was upset about my parents not honouring my choices. But she volunteered this information and it was a health thing and it was cool, like a year. That's listening to the 8-year-old child that I was. That's really honouring the choices, but they were just trying to keep me healthy. So that was cool to have that context, because our memories can be really just one-sided, can't they? We need to be able to look at events from more perspectives than just one. Like I could have held on to the way that I saw that and been real cranky at my parents, but my auntie giving me that information, it's just like, oh, well, I'm grateful. Like clearly if I was sickly, that's okay. Like the person that I am now would say, well, there are other ways to sort it, but I know that they did the best that they could, and it was coming from a place of love, so I get that and I'm good with that. There was another thing that happened as well. Guilt from my behaviour as a teenager come up, but I won't go into that right now. But that second week was not like the first week, because that pressure cooker had been, there was the pressure put in there. It's just like come up in that container. And so yeah, with that second week, a couple of days in, like I didn't want to live there. I just wanted to go. But I stayed because I chose to look in the mirror and not shrink back. My shadows won't resolve themselves. They won't go away by pretending that they're not there, by not looking at them. I have to look. And to look, I have to create the space for them to rise. While I was out at Plum Village, I felt the energy of Thay everywhere. But it wasn't just Thay's energy that I was feeling on that sacred ground. I was feeling the energy of every practitioner who has walked that earth and said, I'm here I'm ready to do this. So we're stronger together. So we need the Sangha. We need the community. We can do things on our own, but we're not supposed to. We're supposed to come together and help each other. I know not everyone has the resources to go spend a 2-week retreat in France, but you don't need to. You can create a container in your own home, like in your own space. It's your energy and it's what you're consuming with all your senses that you can choose. Like before I went there, I watched lots and lots of Thay's talks on YouTube. There's heaps of them. I've probably watched them all, I reckon, multiple times. So he was teaching me before I even went to France. And that's the beauty of this digital age. We have access to so many teachers on YouTube, on Spotify, and libraries. We have so much at our fingertips. Like I'm regretful, I guess, somewhat regretful that I didn't find Thay sooner. Well, if he didn't find me sooner, but like that information had been there for years. I just hadn't gone down those rabbit holes. But the reality is, it wasn't my time. I wasn't ready. It happened when the time was right. Thay hasn't stopped connecting with me. On the contrary, it's just increased and increased. Now it's a rare day that we don't connect. He's one of the most loving, wise, and generous souls I've ever encountered. And I'm privileged to call him a dear friend, without a doubt. He's been one of my greatest teachers.